Staying on that same side of the body. If you had blunt trauma to the head, you were hit with a war club or the butt of a musket. If that wound didn't kill you immediately, it could still cause the brain to swell in that enclosed spot. And because the brain's enclosed, it doesn't have a lot of room for that swelling before you're dealing with brain damage, blindness, even death. So what I need to do is cut a small patch through the flesh there in the top. I would take my retractors, my double retractor and my single retractor, and I'll pull that flesh back. And if you're awake, you want to hold your head steadily, sir, as you imagine that jerking to the side at a time like this is just going to take a terrible day and make it even worse. And we'll need to use that flesh again at a later point as well. And then I would press down and twist to remove a small disc, a circle from the skull. Common practice being to hold on to that disc of skull, keeping it moist in a vessel. And as the pressure and the swelling have gone down, I'd actually put it back in place and sew that flesh back over it. But if you've ever been sewing on something as part of a craft, you may have noticed how sometimes you get off from your mark and you wind up making a larger cut than you meant to, trying to get back to where you started. If I do that in this practice and I wind up with a hole that is bigger than the disc of skull I've created, or if I damage that disc of skull or drop it through the cracks in the floor, I still need to find something to cover that opening. And quite often that would be a coin, hard money. So you have the opportunity today to walk out that door a bit wealthier than you were when you walked in. We can do that for you here today, sir. But that is the trepanning or trepanation. It was often used in those cases of blunt trauma to the skull. I believe it was likely done to at least one and probably two of the soldiers here at Fort Loudoun. We have records of a soldiers dying suddenly from a fall, but I don't get a time on how quickly he died. If he lived long enough, if there were an impact to the head, then there's a very strong likelihood that would have been used upon him. We had a corporal who was part of the crew firing a swivel gun, a small cannon, celebrating the king's birthday. And that tube blew apart. The commanding officer believed that it had been overcharged, but the corporal was injured. It said that it took off over half of his face. He never regained consciousness. He died the next day. Well, that's clearly a head injury. I think it's very likely that that would have been used on him in that time. It was also used in cases where you were believed to be possessed of evil or unsound of mind in culture after culture across much of the globe. And I've often wondered about that. If you endured something so terrible as that based on someone else's accusation, you know, when we think about it, what does unsoundness or evil often look like? Have you ever been just terribly angry and you think back on how you must have come across? When you get mad enough, you have to seem a bit unstable or a bit evil. And of course, the threat of the trepanation may have been enough to make people watch their manners a bit better. I don't know, but I'm sure some went through it that suffered no ailment that called for it. That's a little bit about the treatments on the head trauma of the 18th century.